Is there no one fearless enough to marry me? Only one human man stepped forward. The galaxy had seen many challenges before, but none like this. The ruler of the Koronar Empire, the most advanced and powerful alien race in the universe, had issued a call that shook the stars. Empress Lyra, a being of unmatched beauty and intelligence, was looking for a mate. Not just any mate, but someone who could stand by her side as an equal, someone with the courage to face the trials of the Koronar people and earn a place in her world. Her challenge echoed through the vastness of space, broadcasted to every corner of the galaxy. "Come forth, all who dare," the Empress's voice thundered across the cosmos. "Is there no one brave enough to marry me?" The message reached every corner of the galaxy, and civilizations from every corner of the stars trembled. The Koronar were a force to be reckoned with, their empire stretching across the known universe. They were technologically advanced, virtually indestructible, and their rule was absolute. The thought of a mere mortal or an alien being daring to challenge them for something as simple as marriage seemed impossible. Many considered it a fool's quest, one that no one would dare attempt. But in the far reaches of the galaxy, there was one human who did not fear the challenge. Marcus was an ordinary man by most standards. A former soldier from Earth, he had seen the horrors of war and the pain of loss. His life had been a series of battles, both physical and emotional. Yet, when the Empress's challenge reached his ears, something inside him stirred. He had lost so much in his life already: his family, his friends, and his sense of purpose. But the chance to face an empire like the Koronar, to prove his worth in the face of an impossible task, was something he could not ignore. His reasons were not just driven by ambition or the desire for fame. He was not seeking power or riches. No, Marcus was a man who believed in honor, in love, and in the idea that anyone could achieve greatness if they had the courage to try. The Empress's challenge was not just an invitation. It was a call to prove that even the most unlikely of beings could rise above their circumstances and stand as equals with the gods. It took days for Marcus to make up his mind. He knew that the Koronar had never before allowed anyone from a lesser species to even stand before them, let alone marry their ruler. The idea was ridiculous, almost laughable, but something deep inside him told him to try. He had nothing left to lose, and the thought of stepping into the unknown, of challenging the unimaginable, called to him in a way nothing else had. Marcus packed what little he had and made his way to the docking station. His spaceship was a simple one, not grand or impressive like the fleets that the Koronar controlled, but it was all he had. As the ship lifted off the surface of Earth and entered the depths of space, Marcus felt the weight of the journey ahead. He was about to challenge not just the Empress, but the very idea of what it meant to be human in a galaxy filled with superior beings. When he arrived at the Koronar homeworld, the sight of the planet was awe-inspiring. The surface of the planet gleamed with silver-blue metal, vast cities rising like mountains against the horizon. The sky was unlike anything he had ever seen, filled with swirling clouds of iridescent colors, reflecting the power and majesty of the Koronar Empire. It was a world of unimaginable beauty, one that had seen the rise and fall of countless civilizations. And yet here he was, a single human man standing in front of it all, ready to face the trials of a lifetime. Marcus was led to the Grand Palace, where the Empress awaited him. The palace was a fortress, towering above him as he walked through the massive gates. It was a symbol of the Koronar's power, built to intimidate and overwhelm. But as he stepped inside, he felt a strange sense of calm. The Empress in all her glory was not just a symbol of power. She was a woman, a being with desires and hopes just like any other. And he was here to prove that humanity, despite all its flaws, could stand tall before such a powerful force. The Empress Lyra was seated on her throne, her regal presence commanding the room. Her beauty was otherworldly, her eyes shining like twin moons in the night sky. Her long, flowing hair shimmered with the colors of the stars, and her skin had a soft, ethereal glow. She was the epitome of everything Marcus had heard about the Koronar, powerful, graceful, and utterly untouchable. Yet, as their eyes met, he saw something else in her gaze: curiosity. Perhaps she was wondering what kind of man would dare answer her challenge. "You have come," the Empress's voice was calm, yet it carried a weight of authority that sent shivers down Marcus's spine. "I must ask you, human, what makes you believe you are worthy of my hand? What is it that drives you to face the trials of the Koronar?" Marcus stood tall, though his heart raced with the enormity of the moment. "I am not here for power or riches, Your Highness. I am here because I believe that anyone, no matter where they come from, can be something greater than they are. I've seen death, I've seen loss. I've seen what it means to lose everything, but I still stand, and I will prove that even a human like me has the courage to stand beside you." The Empress studied him for a moment, her gaze piercing. "You are brave to come here, but bravery alone will not be enough. The trials of the Coronar are not for the faint-hearted. They will test you in ways you cannot imagine. Do you understand that?" Marcus nodded. "I understand, but I will face them, no matter the cost." A faint smile appeared on the Empress's lips. "Very well. The first trial begins tomorrow. Be prepared." As Marcus was escorted to his quarters, he couldn't help but wonder what awaited him. The Coronar were not known for mercy, and he had no illusions about the difficulty of the task ahead. But there was something inside him, something deep within his soul, that told him this was his purpose. To face the impossible, to prove that even in the face of certain defeat, he could rise. And maybe, just maybe, he would find a place in the universe where he belonged. The next morning, the first trial began. It was a challenge of strength and skill, designed to test the physical limits of the contestants. Marcus was pitted against a massive creature, a beast unlike anything he had ever seen. It was a mechanical construct, designed to be a living weapon, with razor-sharp claws and a body covered in impenetrable armor. The Coronar had made sure that no one could ever defeat it, but Marcus wasn't concerned with its size or its strength. He knew that the key to defeating the creature was not brute force, but strategy. He studied the beast carefully, observing its movements and the patterns in its attacks. As it lunged toward him with terrifying speed, Marcus sidestepped, using its momentum against it. He attacked its weak spots, exploiting the gaps in its armor. The creature roared in frustration, but Marcus did not relent. His every move was calculated, each strike a deliberate attempt to wear the beast down. And after what felt like an eternity, he finally struck the final blow, bringing the creature to the ground. The crowd that had gathered to watch the spectacle was silent, stunned by the human's victory. The Empress, too, stood in awe. She had not expected him to survive, let alone win. But there he was, standing tall, sweat glistening on his brow, a simple man who had done the impossible. She had underestimated him, and for the first time a sense of respect, even admiration, grew in her heart. "You have passed the first trial," the Empress said, her voice softening just slightly. "But this is only the beginning. There are many more tests ahead. Are you ready for them?" Marcus nodded, determined. "I'm ready." And so the trials continued. But no matter what the Empress threw at him, no matter how impossible the task, Marcus refused to back down. For he knew that this challenge was not just about winning. It was about proving that even the most unlikely of heroes could rise to greatness. And in the heart of a galaxy filled with powerful beings, it was time for humanity to show that it had something truly remarkable to offer. The first trial had been nothing short of a shock to everyone watching, especially the Empress. She had underestimated the human who had dared to step forward. But the victory was only the beginning. The trials of the Coronar Empire were not mere tests. They were designed to break even the strongest of beings. Marcus had won the first trial, yes, but the real challenge was just beginning. The Empress sat on her high throne, observing the man who had shown so much courage and determination. She couldn't help but feel a sense of intrigue. In the vastness of the galaxy, she had faced kings, warriors, and conquerors from every known species. None of them had ever impressed her the way this human did. She had expected him to fail, to break under the weight of the trials. But instead, he had shown strength, intelligence, and a kind of raw willpower that she hadn't anticipated. "You did well in the first trial," the Empress said, her voice echoing through the massive chamber. "But that was only the beginning. The next challenge will be even more difficult." Marcus stood, his chest heaving from the exertion of the previous battle. He had barely had time to catch his breath before the Empress had called for him to meet her, but he didn't mind. The first trial had been hard, but it had also reminded him why he had come. He was here not just for the Empress, but for something deeper. He was here to prove that humanity, despite all its flaws, could stand side by side with the most powerful beings in the galaxy. He was here to show that even a single human could change the course of history. "I'm ready for whatever comes next," Marcus said, his voice steady. The Empress regarded him for a moment, her gaze unreadable. "You will need to be," she replied. The next trial is not one of physical strength. It is a trial of the mind. I will test your intelligence, your ability to think strategically, and your capacity to solve problems under pressure. Many have failed before you, thinking they could outwit me. But no one has succeeded. Let us see if you can prove them wrong. Marcus felt a twinge of nervousness. He had fought in battles, endured physical pain, and faced fear head-on, but he wasn't sure if his mind was prepared for the challenge the Empress was about to set before him. Still, he wasn't going to back down. This was his chance, and he would take it. "I've faced worse," he said, his voice stronger now. "I'm not afraid of whatever test you have for me." The Empress nodded as if she had expected that answer. "Very well, your test begins now." She gestured toward a large holographic display in the center of the chamber. The display flickered to life, showing a complex puzzle, a labyrinth of interlocking shapes, each one appearing to shift and change before his eyes. Marcus frowned, studying the shapes closely. This was unlike anything he had ever seen before. It wasn't just a puzzle. It was an illusion, a moving maze that seemed to have no solution. "This is a puzzle that only the greatest minds of the galaxy have been able to solve," the Empress said, her voice cold and distant. "If you wish to prove your worth, you must navigate this maze and reach the center." Marcus took a deep breath. The puzzle was unlike anything he had encountered, but he had faced difficult situations before. This time, though, it wasn't about brute force. It was about using his mind, thinking outside the box. He had been trained as a soldier, yes, but he had also learned how to think critically and solve problems on the battlefield. This was just another kind of battlefield. He stepped closer to the display, examining the moving shapes. They were shifting in patterns, constantly changing direction, almost as if they were alive. The maze seemed to have no beginning and no end, and every time he thought he had found a way through, the puzzle would shift and trap him again. The pressure was mounting, but Marcus focused. He couldn't afford to make a mistake. The Empress watched from her throne, her eyes narrowing as she observed the human's progress. She had seen many beings attempt the puzzle before, and none of them had come close to solving it. Most had given up after a few minutes, overwhelmed by the complexity. But Marcus was different. He wasn't just trying to solve the puzzle. He was studying it, analyzing every move, every shift. There was a quiet determination in his eyes, and the Empress couldn't help but feel a strange sense of respect for him. Hours passed, and Marcus's progress was slow but steady. He had learned the patterns of the maze, the way the shapes moved and shifted. Slowly but surely, he was making his way toward the center, but the maze was unforgiving. Every time he thought he was close to victory, the puzzle would change again, forcing him to adapt. But Marcus didn't give up. He kept his mind sharp, his thoughts focused. He had come this far, and he wasn't going to stop now. He remembered what the Empress had said. This was a test of his mind, of his ability to think under pressure. This was his chance to prove that he could match the greatest minds in the galaxy. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Marcus reached the center of the maze. The shapes shifted one final time, and then the puzzle was complete. He had done it. He had solved the puzzle. The holographic display flickered and then disappeared, leaving the chamber silent. Marcus stood, breathing heavily, his heart racing. He had done it. Against all odds, he had solved the puzzle that had defeated so many before him. The Empress stood from her throne, her eyes fixed on Marcus. "You have succeeded where others have failed," she said, her voice filled with a rare admiration. "You have proven that you are not only strong but intelligent. Perhaps there is more to you than I first believed." Marcus didn't respond at first. He was still processing the fact that he had solved the puzzle. He had expected it to be difficult, but not this difficult. And yet somehow he had found a way through. It was a reminder to him that no matter how impossible something seemed, there was always a way forward if he just kept trying. "I didn't come here to prove anything to you, Your Highness," Marcus said, his voice steady. "I came here because I believe that humanity can stand side by side with the greatest beings in the galaxy. We may not have your power, but we have something just as strong, determination, and I will keep proving that no matter what." The Empress regarded him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Finally, she nodded. "You are not like the others. You have shown strength, intelligence, and perseverance. These are qualities I respect." Marcus felt a sense of pride swell within him. The Empress's words were not just praise. They were a recognition of his efforts, of everything he had done to get this far. He had won the first trial with his strength, and now he had passed the second with his mind. but he knew there was still more to come. The trials would get harder and the stakes would only rise. "Do not get too comfortable, human," the Empress said, her voice growing cold once more. "The next trial will be even more difficult than this. Are you prepared?" Marcus met her gaze with determination. "I'm ready." And so the trials continued. Each one would test him in new ways, but Marcus was no longer just a man seeking to prove his worth. He had become something more. With every challenge, he was proving that humanity, despite its flaws, had the heart and the will to stand alongside the most powerful beings in the universe. And no matter what the Empress threw at him next, he was ready to face it. The tension in the air was thick, and Marcus could feel the weight of what was to come. The first two trials had been grueling. He had faced a battle of strength and a test of intellect. But as he stood before the Empress once again, he knew that the third trial would be something entirely different. The Coronar were not known for their mercy, and the Empress had made it clear that this challenge would test him in ways he had never imagined. The grand hall was silent, save for the faint hum of the machinery that powered the holographic displays around him. The Empress, seated on her throne, gazed at Marcus with a look that was both curious and calculating. Her expression remained unreadable, but he could feel the intensity of her focus. She was watching him closely, waiting to see how he would react to what she had planned. "You have done well so far," the Empress said, her voice cool and controlled. "But this trial will not be won through strength or intellect alone. It will require something much deeper. It will test your heart." Marcus took a deep breath. He had been expecting this. The first two trials had been physical and mental, but now he would face something that couldn't be solved with tactics or brute force. This would be a test of his very soul. "You will face your greatest fears," the Empress continued, her tone shifting slightly. "And you must make a choice that will define who you are, who you will become." Marcus's mind raced. He had already faced so much in this challenge, so many trials that had pushed him to his limits, but he had never been forced to confront his own fears before. He had buried them deep inside himself, locked away where they couldn't hurt him. But now it seemed the time had come to face them. A strange hum filled the room, and the walls around him began to shimmer and shift. The space distorted, warping into something entirely different. The holograms flickered, and Marcus found himself standing in a dark, desolate landscape. The ground was cracked and barren, the sky a dull shade of gray. It felt as though he was standing in the middle of a nightmare. At first, Marcus didn't understand what was happening, but then, slowly, he began to see figures moving in the distance. Shadows distorted and flickering in and out of focus. His heart began to race. The figures were familiar, but they were twisted, distorted versions of people he had known. Then he saw her, his mother, the woman he had lost so many years ago when the war had taken everything from him. She stood before him, her face a mask of sorrow and regret. Her eyes, once full of love and warmth, were now hollow and distant. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice echoing through the bleak landscape. "Why did you leave me behind? Why didn't you save me?" The words hit him like a blow to the chest. His throat tightened and he struggled to keep his composure. This was his fear, the fear of never having done enough, of never being able to save those he loved. The guilt that had haunted him for years, ever since that fateful day. "Mom," he choked out, stepping forward. "I never wanted to leave you, I couldn't," but she didn't let him finish. The illusion of his mother flickered, her face contorting into something darker. Her voice grew louder, more accusing. "You abandoned me," she screamed. "You didn't fight hard enough. You didn't do enough to save me." Marcus's knees buckled and he dropped to the ground. The weight of his mother's accusation pressed down on him like a heavy stone. He had failed her. He had failed everyone. The guilt was unbearable. It was everything he had tried to run from, everything he had tried to forget. But then a voice, his own voice, spoke out from the depths of his mind. "You are not to blame." The words were quiet, but they were enough. The image of his mother began to fade, and the landscape around him started to shift again. The accusing voices of the past melted away, replaced by the harsh reality of the present. As the scene dissolved, Marcus found himself standing alone in the middle of the hall once more. His knees were weak and his heart was still racing, but the images of guilt and regret had vanished. The Empress stood before him, her expression still as unreadable as ever. "You faced your fear," she said, "but now you must make your choice. The next trial is not about conquering an enemy or solving a puzzle. It is about conquering yourself. You must decide what kind of person you want to be." Marcus stood there, struggling to steady his breath. The images of his past had been real, too real. But now he realized something important. The trial had not been about defeating his mother's ghost or facing some monstrous enemy. It had been about accepting that he could not change the past. No matter how much he wished he had done more, the past was gone. And it was time to move forward. "I've made my choice," Marcus said, his voice steady. The Empress watched him carefully, her eyes narrowing. "And what choice is that?" "I choose to live," Marcus said. "I choose to fight for the future, not dwell on the past. I choose to be the man I need to be, not the man I fear I am." The Empress did not respond at first. She simply looked at him, her expression unreadable. But then, after a long moment, she nodded. "You have passed the third trial," she said, her voice softening ever so slightly. "But there is one final test awaiting you. It will be the most difficult of all." Marcus felt a sense of relief wash over him. He had faced his fear, confronted his past, and made the decision to move forward. But the Empress's words were a reminder that the hardest part of his journey was still ahead. "You have proven yourself strong in mind, body, and heart," the Empress said, "but the final trial will test everything you have learned. Are you ready?" Marcus nodded, his resolve solidifying once again. "I'm ready." As the Empress turned to leave, she glanced over her shoulder at him, her gaze lingering for a moment longer than usual. "Then we shall see if you are truly ready, human. The final trial begins now." Marcus stood tall, every muscle in his body aching from the weight of the trials he had already faced. But he knew that he had come too far to turn back now. Whatever the Empress had in store for him, he would face it. He had already proven that he was capable of overcoming anything that came his way. The final trial was waiting, and Marcus was ready to face it. No matter what it was, no matter how impossible it seemed, he would rise to the challenge. For he had learned that sometimes the greatest strength lies not in defeating others, but in conquering yourself. The final trial loomed before Marcus, and for the first time he felt a sense of dread deep in his chest. He had already faced so much, from grueling battles and complex puzzles to confronting the deepest fears of his past. But the Empress had made it clear that the last challenge would be unlike anything he had encountered before. This was the one that would define his entire journey, the one that would reveal whether he truly had the strength to stand beside her as an equal. The grand hall was eerily silent when Marcus entered. The Empress was not seated on her throne as she had been before. Instead, she stood before a massive, swirling portal that seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly light. The air around it crackled with energy, and the hum of the power it radiated made Marcus's skin tingle. "You have proven your worth in many ways, human," the Empress said, her voice as steady as ever, but there was something in her eyes that betrayed a hint of anticipation. "But the final trial will test everything you have learned. It will not be an easy challenge. You will face an enemy unlike any you've seen before." Marcus nodded, his heart pounding. He had come this far, but he knew that this trial would push him beyond his limits. He had already proven his strength, his mind, and his ability to face his fears. But now he had to prove something deeper, a will to survive, a will to fight for something more than himself. The Empress's gaze softened just a little. "This trial will not be about brute strength or intellect," she continued. "It will be about something far more important. It will be about sacrifice. You will be forced to make a choice, and that choice will determine the outcome of the trial." Marcus stepped forward, feeling a cold rush of uncertainty. He had heard the Empress's words, but he wasn't entirely sure what they meant. A choice. Sacrifice? What could she possibly ask of him now? Without further explanation, the Empress gestured to the portal. "Step through. The trial begins on the other side." Marcus hesitated for a moment, but then he squared his shoulders and walked toward the portal. As soon as he stepped through, the world around him shifted once more. The familiar surroundings of the grand hall vanished, replaced by an unfamiliar, barren wasteland. The sky above was a dull, sickly orange, and the ground was cracked and scorched, as though a great battle had taken place here long ago. He looked around, but there was no sign of life. The wasteland stretched on for what seemed like miles, empty and desolate. It felt as though time had stopped here, as though this place had been forgotten by the universe itself. Then, from the distance, he saw it, movement. A figure appeared on the horizon, walking slowly toward him. As the figure came closer, Marcus saw that it was a woman, young, strong, and beautiful. She wore simple clothes, and her eyes were full of sorrow. But there was something else there too, something familiar. The closer she got, the more he realized that he recognized her. It was Myra, the woman he had loved before the war had torn their world apart. She was the one he had left behind, the one he had failed to save. He had never expected to see her again, let alone in a place like this. But there she was, standing before him, her eyes searching his face as if looking for something she had lost. "Myra," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes flickered with recognition, but she didn't smile. She simply stood there, her gaze fixed on him. "Why did you leave me?" she asked, her voice full of pain. "Why didn't you save me, Marcus?" The question hit him like a punch to the gut. He had heard it 1,000 times in his dreams and his nightmares. The guilt had never gone away, no matter how much he tried to bury it. He had failed her. He had failed everyone. And now, in this strange place, it seemed like the universe had brought her back to make him face that failure once again. "I never wanted to leave you, Myra," Marcus said, his voice cracking. "I never wanted to fail you. I couldn't save you. I tried, but You didn't try hard enough," Myra interrupted, her voice rising with anger. "You didn't fight for me. You left me to die." Marcus felt his heart shatter at the words. She was right. He had left her behind when he shouldn't have. He had chosen to fight for something else, to fight for a cause, and in doing so, he had failed the one person who had meant everything to him. He had abandoned her. Myra's figure began to flicker and distort, her face contorting with anger and grief. The illusion of her seemed to shimmer and waver, as if she were fading into the very air itself. But before she vanished completely, she spoke again. "You will always be a failure, Marcus," she whispered, her voice now softer, more distant. "No matter how hard you try, you can never change the past." The world around him began to crack, the desolation breaking apart as the ground beneath his feet crumbled. The illusion of Myra disappeared and the emptiness of the wasteland returned. Marcus was left standing alone, his breath ragged in his chest. A voice echoed in his mind. It was the Empress. "The trial is not over," she said, her voice distant but clear. "You have seen your greatest regret. You have been forced to confront your failure, but now you must make a choice." Marcus turned in all directions, his mind racing. A choice? What did that mean? What kind of choice could he make in a place like this? Then he saw it, an image. It was brief, but it burned itself into his mind. Myra, alive and smiling, standing beside him as they looked out over a peaceful world. A life that could have been, a future that had never come to pass. The illusion flickered again, and Marcus saw a vision of himself, a different version of himself, standing with Myra, his arms wrapped around her, both of them safe, both of them whole. But the vision was not without sacrifice. In the distance, he saw a group of people, men and women he did not know, gathering together, waiting for him to make a decision, waiting for him to choose what was more important, the life he could have had or the responsibility he had now. The Empress's words echoed in his mind again. "Sacrifice, Marcus. You cannot have everything. You must choose." Marcus's heart clenched. He understood now. The trial was not about defeating an enemy or overcoming a physical obstacle. It was about choosing between two things that were both precious to him. He could choose to live in the past, to hold on to the memory of Myra and the life they might have had. Or he could choose to move forward, to fight for a future that would never be perfect, but one that could still be meaningful. The decision was clear, but that didn't make it any easier. He had to let go of the past. He had to accept that some things could never be undone. And while that would always hurt, it was the only way forward. "I choose the future," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the emotions that swirled within him. As soon as the words left his mouth, the vision of Myra faded completely, and the wasteland began to dissolve. The air around him shimmered, and the world began to shift once more. The final trial had been completed. Marcus stood alone in the hall once again, but this time there was a sense of peace within him. He had faced his greatest regret, made his choice, and accepted the responsibility of moving forward. He had done what was necessary, not just for the future, but for himself. And in doing so, he had proven that he was ready for whatever came next. The Empress appeared before him once more, her gaze as piercing as ever. "You have completed the final trial, Marcus," she said, her voice calm but filled with respect. "You have proven that you are not only strong and intelligent, but that you have the heart and the will to sacrifice for something greater than yourself." Marcus nodded, feeling a sense of pride welling up inside him. He had done it. He had faced the trials and come out stronger for it, but the Empress's next words took him by surprise. "Now the true challenge begins." And with that, Marcus understood that while the trials had ended, his journey was far from over. The real test, the one that would define his future, was just beginning. Marcus stood in the vast hall, his heart still pounding from the intensity of the trials he had just faced. The Empress was before him, her presence imposing yet somehow calming. He had passed all of the trials, strength, intellect, and heart. But the final challenge, the one she had promised would test him in ways beyond his understanding, was now upon him. The air in the room felt heavier, charged with an electric energy that made Marcus's skin prickle. The Empress had not spoken for several moments, but Marcus could sense that something was coming, something far more profound than anything he had experienced in the last few days. The weight of her silence was enough to make him wonder what lay ahead. "You have proven yourself worthy, human," the Empress said at last, her voice carrying an odd mixture of respect and something else, something deeper. "But now comes the final choice, a choice that will not only determine your fate, but the fate of the galaxy itself." Marcus's mind raced. He had already faced so much, yet something told him that this was different. The trials had been designed to test him personally, to push him to his limits. But this was something entirely new. He couldn't help but wonder what kind of choice the Empress was referring to. "Let me explain," the Empress continued, her gaze softening just slightly. "I have been searching for someone worthy of standing beside me as a partner, someone who could challenge me, someone who could help me lead the Coronar into a new era. But now, after everything you've proven, the question is not whether you are worthy to be with me. The question is whether you are ready to make the ultimate sacrifice." Marcus's heart skipped a beat. A sacrifice? The word hung in the air like a shadow, threatening to consume him. He had already made sacrifices, he had already lost so much, but now, it seemed, the Empress was asking for something even greater. What could she possibly ask of him now? The Empress walked slowly toward him, her footsteps soft and deliberate. She seemed to be studying him closely, as if searching for something in his eyes. "You see, Marcus," she said, her voice almost wistful, "the Coronar have ruled the galaxy for centuries. Our power is unmatched, our empire is eternal. But there is a problem, one that I have kept hidden from all but a few of my closest advisors." Marcus frowned, feeling a sense of unease. "What problem?" The Empress paused, her expression darkening. "I have lived for centuries, and in that time I have witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. I have seen the galaxy expand and evolve, but there is something that even my people cannot overcome. We are slowly dying, Marcus. Our species, our empire, everything we have built, it's all beginning to crumble." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard whispers of the Coronar's power, their indestructible nature, but he had never imagined that they could be facing such a crisis. "Why?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "How is that possible? You're the most powerful beings in the galaxy." The Empress sighed deeply, her eyes distant as if she were seeing something far beyond the walls of the hall. "Our longevity, our strength, our power, these things come at a price. The Coronar have never known true love, true companionship. We have never known what it means to be vulnerable, to truly care for another. And now our bodies, our minds, our very souls are beginning to wither because of it." Marcus struggled to process what she was saying. The Coronar, immortal, powerful, were dying because they lacked something as simple, yet as profound, as love. It didn't make sense. "So what does this have to do with me?" Marcus asked, his mind racing. "How can I help you?" The Empress turned to face him fully, her gaze sharp and intense. "The only way to save my people is through connection, through love. You, Marcus, are the first being I have ever encountered who has shown me something real, something I have never known before. And now I ask you, will you give yourself to me? Will you be the one who breaks the cycle, the one who saves not only me but my entire race?" Marcus's heart slammed in his chest. He had expected many things, but this was not what he had anticipated. The Empress was asking him to be more than just her equal, more than a ruler by her side. She was asking him to change the very fabric of her people, to sacrifice his own future for theirs. The room felt impossibly still, and for a long moment, Marcus did nothing but stare at her. He could feel the weight of her words pressing down on him, threatening to crush him. This was not just a simple decision. This was the kind of choice that would alter the course of history. Finally, Marcus spoke, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside him. "You want me to give up everything to become part of you in order to save your people?" The Empress nodded, her eyes softening as she looked at him. Yes, but not just that. If you choose to bind yourself to me, you will not only save the Coronar, you will change the future of the galaxy. You will bring a new era, one of true connection, true compassion, but it will require a sacrifice, a deep, personal sacrifice. You will never be the same again. Marcus felt his chest tighten. He had already sacrificed so much in his life. He had given up his home, his family, his future, all in the name of duty and honor. But this was different. This wasn't about doing what was right for the greater good. This was about something far more personal, far more profound. He thought back to everything he had faced, the battles, the losses, the pain. He had fought for survival, for something greater than himself. But now he was being asked to give up his very essence in order to save an entire race. Was he willing to make that sacrifice? Was he willing to lose himself for the greater good? The silence in the room was unbearable, and Marcus knew that the decision had to be made. The choice was his and his alone. Finally, he spoke, his voice low but filled with resolve. I choose to save your people. I choose to help you build the future you've longed for. I choose to sacrifice myself for the greater good. The Empress's eyes softened, a hint of something resembling gratitude flickering in her gaze. You have made the right choice, Marcus. Your selflessness will change everything. Together, we will build a new future, one where love, compassion, and connection can heal even the most broken of civilizations. As she spoke, the room seemed to shift, the air growing thick with the energy of their shared decision. Marcus could feel the weight of the choice settling on his shoulders, but there was no fear, only determination. He had made his decision, and though it would be hard, he knew that this was the right path. The Empress extended her hand, and Marcus took it without hesitation. He had made the ultimate sacrifice, but in doing so, he had found a new purpose, one that would shape the future of the galaxy. And so Marcus and the Empress, bound by a shared vision of hope and love, stood together at the dawn of a new era, an era that would be defined by compassion, sacrifice, and the courage to face the impossible.